The Cyber Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Listen responsibly. Welcome back to the Cyber Minutes podcast. We have Flynn, and myself, Max, as always. Let's jump right into it. MFA. Let's go from kind of a corporate angle. If you can't do it, what controls can you have in place to make your systems equally as secure as having it?
Yeah, so I think there's multiple ways you can go about it. There's one method which, if you have sort of a corporate bubble, like an MDM system, you could potentially ban that application on devices and then only allow that application if you're going through, say, like a jump server or something like that.
What do you mean by application? So
let's just make an example. I don't know, the chair application doesn't allow MFA. So you can just completely ban that application on that and then say, but then allow it on this other device. But to get to that device, you have to authenticate through it.
Okay. So like have a precursor step that requires it.
Yeah, exactly. So then that way you have to jump through there, but you have to use MFA to get there.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be blocked on your devices anyway.
Yeah.
I'd say that's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is just being more stringent with password controls. It's not perfect, but having, say, like normally if passwords change every 6 months, maybe lowering that to 1 month. It's not perfect, but
I think 1 month is probably right on the limit of not having like that fatigue that you get. Changing your passwords every so often. And the issue is once you're doing it any sooner than 1 month, I think everyone's just going to be doing password.
I think it gets
one,
worse. Yeah.
Password 2 on the end of it, 3.
And then they reinstall it from 3 times ago because it didn't remember it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it gets worse.
I think probably 1, maybe 2 months is probably.
I think 1 is the minimum. But I would not recommend 1 on regular applications. I would only say 1 in those very particular instances. One thing I will say about MFA as well is that, at least with a lot of smaller organizations, I've been seeing that they'll usually have MFA across the board, and particularly if you're assessing against something like Essential, like you have to have MFA for all your employees, but there's always the 2 or 3 people who refuse to have it.
Okay.
I think that's, in the modern age where we're getting to, I think that's becoming a real problem, especially because I think we're getting to the point where everybody should be using MFA, and it's kind of like, if someone doesn't want to do it.
I think we'll jump to that in a second, but I think that another thing that you probably could do if you don't have MFA is have some smart Azure or whatever cloud system you're using, some smart conditional access policies in place, so they're going to detect whether someone's logging in a perfectly normal scenario, or if there's anything anomalous about their logging in. So that means maybe they're not logging in from a regular time frame, which they
or like geofencing.
Geofencing, yeah. IPv6 makes it a little bit more difficult because a lot of things are moving now, and you can't really geo IPv6 that easily, from my understanding.
I was actually unaware of that. So
yeah. So I think that one of the parts of IPv6 is that your geolocation is more hidden, harder to distinguish, which makes certain conditional access policies and certain geo-blocking really, really annoying and really difficult, which is it's meant to be better for the customer, for the private individual, which it is, but it also means on the corporate end, if we're trying to geo-block China or Russian accounts, which, most of the time they're going to be running a VPN anyway, but if we're trying to do that, it makes it more difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, so conditional access, login times, login locations, login applications, MAC addresses, what is the expected OS of someone if they're suddenly logging in from Ubuntu, right? When they're normally on Windows 10, that's obviously something that is going to prompt some additional level of
suspicion.
Yeah, of course. So jumping back to what I think you're about to start saying is, you should really be having MFA though. Like, these things are all good, but these are really best used in conjunction with MFA. And I think if you don't have MFA, then you're at a pretty big disadvantage for that.
Yeah, I think we're getting to a point where MFA is standard and it's best practice, thankfully, because it is such a fantastic tool that is such commonplace now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to say how you get these people on board. Obviously, they're usually older people that aren't really tech savvy. Hopefully that gets phased out in the following years once people get more and more used to this stuff.
It's pretty easy now, really. There's a lot of providers that...
Yeah, there's really no excuse behind it. I think these people, you kind of do have to have a sit down with them and say, like, look, I know it's a pain in the ass, but you got to do it.
Yeah. Like the human factor of, I can't really be bothered is really a huge weak link.
Yeah, I mean, learning things in like this tech sphere, I know it's very hard for a lot of people. It's hard for me sometimes, but there's just certain subset of things in this modern world where you can't go without learning them, really.
100%.
Yeah.
And like, as obviously the baseline's going to keep moving up.
Yeah, of course.
And
we're going to be those people one day.
Exactly, yeah. Can't stay young forever. So, yeah, obviously they're going to be a bit of an issue. But what I was saying is, like, the ease of use for a lot of MFA apps are really quite good. So, even if it's Microsoft Authenticator, where you literally just click the app and just log into your phone normally, and that runs the MFA, or even text messaging.
Text messaging's not as good, though.
Not as good. But also, that's one that works, and
with a lot of our like Essential 8, it's not very requirement. Like, you can still be compliant using SMS, but we always recommend like SMS can be exploited very easily. Still, it's better than nothing, but there's a lot of ways. I think you can even intercept the traffic. I think you could do that pretty easily, but you can also just easily manipulate someone. Like, hey,
give you the
text message. Yeah,
on Telstra.
It's notoriously been insecure for a while. If you can't have any other method, I suppose it's better than nothing, but it's not ideal.
But at the same time, ease of access isn't great for MFA either, because once you get the password to somebody's account and you start spamming MFA, a lot of people are going to sort of approve MFA without thinking about it.
That's kind of the issue. So that's a really good point. The Microsoft have kind of started tackling this with their number matching.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
I was going to say, we saw an incident recently with a guy, and they were going through a security change of their IT infrastructure. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was getting a lot of different requests for MFA, so it was just natural, and somebody kept spamming him, and he, not thinking about it, he just accepted it. And then that was when the breach happened. The best method is from what I understand, is the one where it makes you log in and it gives you the couple of numbers and then you have to type it in.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can also use like biometrics and stuff, but that's a bit hardware linked.
Even if you begrudgingly go, it's like you get very MFA exhausted and you hit accept, it's then they're going to say, okay, what numbers are you seeing on the computer?
Yeah.
And if you actually know, you go, oh, shit.
Actually, I did hear another incident where somebody, it was 3 in the morning, they were at a conference in another country, and they rolled over in their bed and they just clicked it, not even thinking about it, because they're in the middle of the night. So
shut up.
It's the best method is that one we said, where it prompts you with the number that you have to put in.
But then, I guess text messaging has sort of been doing that for a while, but combining the usefulness of having that information that's normally passed through text messaging, but now through a secure application on your phone is probably, like you said, probably the best.
Yeah, I'd have to relook at why SMS is insecure, but I know it's
there's heaps of reasons.
I think the big part that, to my understanding, is that SMS is quite secure, but it's just, why do SMS when you have this super secure method of number matching?
No, I think it's actually not secure.
Yeah, there are ways to get by it. But the stars need to align still in many cases, but the stars do align.
So one thing interesting that's bringing up and coming in text messages, is it still possible to reach out to telcos and easily impersonate someone using just an email address and a phone number? Because I haven't heard about it all the time, but I've seen a few cases of people's phone numbers that I've actually previously known to be hacked and sending me now spam notifications.
It's definitely possible. I haven't heard about it recently, but even besides, I think it's going to be easier in a sense that you might not be able to give them your phone number or your birth date, and maybe it's a bit difficult now, but something that I've been seeing a lot of telcos do, which I'm actually not a fan of, is they've been doing a lot of voice recognition, and we know that I mean, a lot of the time you see people call you up and then they instantly hang up. A lot of the time they're just trying to get your voice. They're trying to get the hello.
Yeah.
So then they can, well, we know how good voice cloning's becoming.
What's that? What's the Apple one? There's like a new feature. It was either Apple or Google or Microsoft that had a working prototype, and it was like if it listens to you for, I think it was 30 seconds of unique audio. So not words like but if you're saying sentences, so 30 seconds, I think they're able to construct like an 80% realistic.
Oh, there's heaps of models online now. I was using one recently, which sounds a bit counterproductive because I'm saying don't do it. But I mean, we're doing a podcast, so everyone has our voice out there.
Yeah.
I think it's called Resemble AI, where it does a similar thing. It wasn't perfect because I didn't want to give it a ton of. I think I did like 25 samples or something like that. And it was pretty decent.
Really?
I think it was
from your voice.
Yeah, from my voice. Wow. I used it in a training slide that Flynn was able to hear, and it wasn't perfect. Like Flynn could tell that it was AI, but we did
tell that it was him. Yeah,
yeah, and that I tricked someone to do this. So.
That uncovers an entire new part of impersonation where it's not just telcos, right? That's you're going to be much easier to potentially like breach and compromise people with that as well.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go through that extra vector of going through the telco. You could just call someone's boss, find their phone number.
Yeah, there's something I've covered in training recently. Is that it's going to be increasingly difficult to verify who someone is over the phone. One of the main methods I would say that's really good is just having 2 points of communication.
Yeah.
It's almost like a personal MFA where you kind of have to be personal one-on-one with someone, but if Max calls me on my phone and it sounds a little bit suspicious, he's asking for something weird, I can just send him a message on whatever platform, Discord, and then if he goes, hey, that's not me, there you go. There was a case in America where someone was cloning a daughter's voice trying to basically get some ransom. I think they were trying to convince them that they were kidnapped.
Yeah.
And then the dad was very gonna go pay it or whatever, and then the mum did a due diligence, called the kid, and turned out it was not them. So yeah, it's gonna be increasingly difficult to verify.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago when I started uni and I started hearing about this stuff, I used to try and like talking to people who are obviously scammers on the phone and just playing along and playing dumb. But honestly, nowadays, my greeting has gone from, hi, this is Max, whatever, to literally just me. I just say hello on the phone now and just wait for the other end to give it least verbal feedback as possible.
Yeah, I only really say like, hi, this is Flynn, if I know who it's coming from nowadays.
Yeah.
But then do you need to say, hi, this is Flynn, if you know them?
Oh, well, for an example today, I knew I was getting a call from a client. I don't personally know them, but I knew that it was coming through, so I said,
yeah. I mean, so you have passphrases for your close friends and family too.
Passphrases.
I said banana or something like that.
I mean, that's probably a pretty good method.
Yeah, the only problem is like if somebody gets a hold of like a whole conversation, like why did they just say banana?
Yeah, so that's this goes back to another thing with if somebody's going to that effort, they're going to get you.
The passphrase might be a way to go, like a little bit of a secret handshake.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can actually. Maybe there needs to be an improvement in technology and stuff like that, but I have no idea how you would address it.
Is that what you're thinking?
Maybe. It's hard to say. I think we've spoken in the past about how insecure things like email and even phone calls are, and I don't know if there's a way to get. Maybe companies can do something like that where they give you sort of like a digital key. But
the issue is that the phone network is sort of built off the telephony, like old school, like 80s telephony network, and that was very insecure. But there was no need for security because nobody was like smart enough to exploit it. Really,
they didn't even think of it.
Yeah, they didn't even think of it, and I think the same goes with the SMS thing. And only now with like iMessage are they sort of building it up off this network onto Wi-Fi.
Yep.
But even then, the ID is still attached to your phone number.
Yeah.
And then there's the other problem, as we said before. Imagine trying to get everyone off of phone calls. It's just not realistic.
No, not true at all. All right, we'll move on a little bit. So just as a closing note, if you're a customer using a product that doesn't have MFA, maybe it's time for a new product.
Yeah, I think it's a red flag. If there is an alternative, I would recommend looking at it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. You don't mean to shout out anyone, but CommBank,
Yeah.
get your shit together. So if you're a customer of CommBank, there's still very limited MFA capabilities for your...
I think it's a common thing in banking in general in Australia, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And we have speculations, but we have no idea why it's not commonplace.
Yeah.
But
Yes, also, keep your dependence low. If you can't use MFA, like, don't use it as much as you can. Only use it for what's absolutely necessary, really.
using it.
Like, like the service itself. Like, say you're using a service and it hasn't got MFA. If you can keep your dependence on that service low.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
or give it as least amount of data as possible.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, like,
Expect
minimum
that it's going to be breached at some point if there's minimal controls there in the first place.
Use the burner emails.
That's a classic.
Yeah.
Make sure to use first name dot last name +5. That's another good one. See where the emails are coming from. So we're going to move on. So strategies for combating phishing in the modern world. How do we personally go about it? So modern phishing has gotten a lot more advanced, a lot more sophisticated in my own experience with the prevalence of things like ChatGPT and large language models that are coming out. We're seeing that phishing is getting easier to mass produce for people with less knowledge of speaking English. Like, we've all probably had a bit of experience in phishing. What are some things that we personally do to make sure that the phishing isn't, make sure that we're not responding to phishing emails or clicking the links by accident? Might pass this one to Flynn for a sec.
Yeah. So I think even though it has gotten better, a lot of hitting the foundational stuff is still going to be number one.
Yeah.
I think if something sounds too good to be true, it is.
Yeah.
You don't have a Nigerian prince uncle. It's not a thing. And
do people still fall for that?
I'm sure. I mean, people still do it, so it's got to happen. As we said, setting up multiple forms of communication is another big one.
Yep. So something that I might just add a little bit on that is some visual elements as well is still important, especially in emails. You can still tell if you're expecting an email from a company like Westpac, they have people to make sure that their emails, all of the format is right with the buttons and everything. It looks all pretty and perfect. If it's dodgy and it looks sketchy, then it probably is, and it's probably not legitimate.
Yeah, I think urgency is a big one as well. If someone's trying to make you do something quickly, that's a big red flag. Someone's trying to basically make you slip up and click something and not think about it. Always go to a website. Don't click a link, even if it seems legitimate. Like, for example, Toll. I use Toll because it's such a common scam. And also, I think Toll is not very good in their actual text messages. They seem like scam messages.
Yeah.
Just go to the actual website. Don't click the link. And then you can just tell.
Yeah, I don't know. My approach is keep my emails to a minimum, really. Like, I'm not trying to receive emails too much. And I granted, in my line of work, I don't get too many emails, but even in my personal life, I try to keep my subscriptions to a minimum. I don't want people emailing me at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, same thing as you guys. Like, don't click links. Just go to the website and check the notifications or whatever it is there.
Yeah, I suppose another problem is that it's not limited to emails, especially with us being at like the start of our careers. LinkedIn's a real pivotal part of our connections, networking.
Yeah.
And that's just, I see it all the time as phishing on LinkedIn, like, oh, do you want to do this? Sometimes it's actually hard to distinguish. Sometimes, oh, I've got this crazy job offer. And like, I don't know if that's legitimate or not. But always be suspicious from the get-go, I think, is a massive thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's phishing or not, but I used to get a lot of messages from people on LinkedIn talking about wanting to
online
hook me up with their mentor and like start an e-commerce business.
Yeah,
and they're always like, oh, it's free. It's separate stream of income. I have no idea. I didn't entertain it that far. But, it was just, the first one seemed legitimate because it was coming from some guy who was supposedly hired for a company and it looked very legitimate. And I was believing it for a bit, but it took me to like maybe the third or fourth message where I was like, no, this is obviously bullshit.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn actually has a massive problem. We had a client recently that was saying you can just say you're from a company on LinkedIn. Only really the big companies, they give you like a token, but not every company can get that. And this was like a fairly big government entity. They were pretty important, and they had just some random people in France saying they worked for them.
Yeah,
and it's not great.
So for an exercise I did, actually, I had to create a fictional character. I won't use the name of the fictional character I made. However, I added him to a organization that I didn't think would mind, and I gave him a bogus sort of job name, and he was actually up. The account was up. Nothing happened to it. It was up for about a week before it got deactivated. And
Wow.
Even though it was a bogus job, like anyone who actually worked from the organization would be able to know it's not real. It's just someone, trying to use it as an exercise or whatever. But, say if you're really trying to impersonate someone, it's very easy. It's very easy, and your accounts aren't going to get instantly removed from LinkedIn. It's going to take probably a week.
I've even been guilty of this, is that you kind of look at their following list, like, oh, they've got a lot of followers, maybe they're real, but it's realistically easy to just get a bunch of bots to just add you.
100%.
I think another big thing with phishing though is just trusting your gut. I think it's not obvious a lot of the time, but if something feels off, it's probably off.
Yeah, even not trusting your gut, trusting just general skepticism.
Yeah.
So what my strategy I've kind of employed a little bit is, in terms of my text messages and my emails from companies, I pretty much don't even open anything that I wasn't expecting, really. There are some cases where you look at it and you go, okay, maybe this one's true, but if there's a message from Westpac or from Combank or from Toll, right, if you weren't expecting it, just ignore it, because it's kind of very likely to be bullshit, especially if they're trying to demand something from you. And I've actually just pulled up a list from Microsoft's Protect Yourself from Phishing page, and the key kind of areas which they pull upon for phishing of any kind is an urgent call to action or threats, which is what we just talked about. If it's the first time, or it's an infrequent sender, if it's spelling and bad grammar, if it's got generic greetings, so just hey, mismatched email domain, so if you try and inspect the email domain and it's not consistent, that can usually be spoofing. If it's got suspicious links or unexpected attachments, as well as the last one there. So if any of your kind of communications are having at least a couple of these, then it's very likely that it's going to be just fake.
Yeah, back to links and emails as well. I think that a common thing people used to do a while ago was that they would look at the link, and if it looked like a legitimate link, it was like, oh, okay, well, this is legitimate.
Yeah.
What people don't think about a lot of the time is that there's often redirects.
Yeah.
So if you're hovering over the link, sometimes it will just give you the first one.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's just a redirect to something else.
Yeah.
And then that's the malicious link.
Very good. All right, so moving on. So file formats. What are some of the dangerous ones, and which ones fly under the radar the most easily? Well, we obviously know that downloading EXEs is probably the worst file format.
Yeah.
If you're on a website and you see an EXE pop into your browser tab, then you might be in a little bit of trouble. But there are actually, you guys have just told me, this is kind of news to me, that a very common one is WAVs.
I don't think it's common, but I think it's just uncommon that people realize there is a lot of file types that can be malicious.
Yep.
As Flynn was saying, a lot of malware is just hidden in headers.
Yeah, files you wouldn't expect it. Like back in my early days of learning about computers and computing and software, I thought, a PNG is just raw data. It's just ones and O's. But no, actually, a lot of the headers, it has a header section where it defines a lot of metadata and presumably some ways for the computer to interpret the actual data, and these instructions on how to interpret the actual data can maybe extend beyond just how to interpret the data, actually things that your computer should do. I'm not exactly sure of the details, but I know that there are PNG exploits out there, and you said there's WAV exploit.
It's honestly the majority of them. There's a ton of them. I think that I would say with organizations is, if you don't need a particular file type, just ban it. Just block the file type in general.
Yeah,
I think it's a massive thing with applications in general, is that if you don't need something, just don't use it. Macros is a big one where a lot of people don't use macros, or it's a very particular subset of people in an organization. just set up a group policy so only those people can use macros under set conditions, and then you can't have a macro execute on your environment if you can't even use macros.
Yeah, it might be a good thing to just kind of run a brief overview of what a macro actually is. Right?
Yeah, so I guess a macro is just take a set of actions that you do in, let's say, so the place we use macros most often is an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. Take anything you do in a Word document, typing a word, formatting and coloring a section of the document or creating a table. A macro can do all these things in sequence extra fast with you just clicking one button. And, the scary thing is that macros can do more. They can be backed up onto like full-blown programming languages like BASIC and C#. And, once you got BASIC or C# running, the possibilities sort of grow endless.
The problem with macros and stuff like that is they're just too powerful.
Yeah.
They can do too much, and if a malicious person gets their hands on that, they can...
Well, they get their hands on an account that is able to...
Yeah.
And this is amazing for power users of Word and Excel and for anybody who really wants to up their productivity. But there is a big scare when you get macros. You can't trust a macro.
Yeah.
The idea of macros is that you write your own and don't do much else.
Yeah. Or you can use digital signatures and trusted publishers and stuff like that. Or if you have macros, just making sure they run in a sandbox environment beforehand. There's ways around it, but at the end of the day, if you don't need it, just disable it.
Yeah.
And that goes with all file types.
Yeah. And most people don't use macros, so just, as a company, it makes sense.
Goes with everything. If you're not using a port, close it. It's simple.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Other file types, this isn't really file types, but off this in sort of the area of cybersecurity that most people don't think about. Yeah, package managers, I mentioned that a little bit before. This is a big issue in software development, I think. One of my first projects that I worked on, this was a web development project sort of thing, and we were using Node.js and NPM. And I remember seeing we had hundreds of vulnerabilities. So NPM is a package library manager. It provides you code from online and it prevents you from having to write more code for your web app. Other people have written it for you. The issue is a lot of people can write code that isn't good or is entirely malicious. But yeah, with this project, there was hundreds of vulnerabilities on the weekend. And then as you got not the weekend as in the days, on the weak vulnerabilities. And then there were tens of medium vulnerabilities. And I think maybe 10 extreme vulnerabilities. And, I asked about this because this is a little bit concerning. I want to know what this means. I wasn't exactly sure on what vulnerabilities referred to at that point. Was it a vulnerability in that the code could fail, or was it a vulnerability in that somebody could exploit it? And, they were like, oh, don't worry about it. Doesn't cause any problems in the in the development. It's fine. And, my perspective there has changed a lot.
It's fairly lax.
Was this was this... I assume this was in uni as well.
So I've got a project I'm working on at uni, and where we're starting to get those NPM vulnerabilities creep in. And this isn't really something I'm going to care about too much for uni, but it's something that I'm conscious of as software engineer.
I think it goes back to what you were saying the other week, where a lot of software engineering education just doesn't seem to be security focused.
Yeah, that's not.
Where sure, maybe it's going to blockade on your assignment or your project, but even just addressing that, hey, we can use this for now, but this is actually a massive issue and you can't use this in a actual production environment.
It's like having using vulnerable imports as well into your code, right? It's like the same thing.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. This is all libraries we're talking about here. Yeah. So it's a big sort of area I think a lot of people are completely uncautious about.
Comes into the importance of, having things like NPMs and static code analysis, dynamic code analysis to make sure that the code that you're putting into your products is not dodgy. It doesn't contain any dodgy malware in it as well. Great. Well, thanks for listening to this episode of the Cyber Minutes podcast with Flynn, and myself. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Just a reminder that the Cyber Minutes podcast is for educational purposes only. The views expressed by hosts and guests are their own, not necessarily their employers. Advice discussed is general advice. We promote ethical discussions, not illegal activities. Have a cybersecurity question? Send an email to cyberminutespodcast@gmail.com, as we'd love to answer it. Stay cyber safe.